schedule so we can get as much information before we have to leave. Mike's going to do his section on pet retention, which is awesome.
Thank you. And I would just, while I'm going to try to multitask here while I'm doing this, the other thing that I'm going to just mention is that she mentioned that they were shipping animals to Minnesota, and that Minnesota is killing a lot of animals, and so guess how I feel about animals being shipped to Minnesota. The thing is, I'm not a fan of out-of-state transport with rescues, so just to be clear. All right. So I'm guessing nobody is, this is new for people, In case anybody is hard of reading, it just simply says, Rufus returns his owner because she keeps having babies. And, there is actually a whole series, so I'll just go through them. Rover returns his owner because he's got too big. I love that. He was so little when we got him. Rufus returns his owner because she sheds. It's everywhere. It's even in the food. Rufus returns his owner because he's moving. They don't allow humans where we're going. I love this one. Rover returns his owner because he disobeys. We even sent you to obedience school. Well, there's a reason that those are funny because they're so symbolic of what we hear at the shelters all the time. And the reason those excuses sound so silly is very simple. They're not the real reason. So what we're going to talk about is pet retention, and we're going to talk more about why I know those aren't the real reasons, and why we need to do a better job finding out what the real reasons are. That's going to be what this is all about. And before we get too deeply into it, I want to share some premise with you, because from my perspective, this is a topic that gets very deep into our mission and purpose. Why is animal control here? Why are animal welfare organizations here? What is our ultimate responsibility? What's our goal? And for me, I would say one of the crucial roles for animal shelters and animal control is to teach responsibility and responsible pet stewardship. If we're not doing that, how can we make our community a better place for people and pets? And I really believe those two things go hand in hand. When we make the world better for pets, we make it better for the people too. So those two things go hand in hand. And so a good pet retention program is going to be really good for the pets, and it's going to be really good for the people. Another premise is that we're going to base this conversation on, and by the way, any of these things that I say as a premise, if anybody strongly disagrees with me about it, let me know. I'll be very surprised. I mean, I just think that these are kind of fundamental truths that I think most people would agree on. And this premise is that people learn much more from what we do than what we tell them to do. I think the actual number, the research says children in school learn about, or children with their parents learn about 7% from what they're told. They learn all the rest by watching the example their parents set for them. And so, what does that, think about that. What does that mean? What are we teaching the kids when their parents bring their best friend to the shelter and just easily dispose of them? Think about it. So, this topic is a really big topic. I could literally do 4 hours on pet retention alone, and I've got 30 minutes. So again, we're going to be flying through this. And I believe because it goes right to the core of who we are as a society and how we're going to make a better society for children and pets, it is to me the most important and heartfelt. Proactive redemption, really important for getting to the numbers. Pet retention, super important for making our society and world a better place for kids and animals. There's studies that prove and show that children who learn responsible pet stewardship grow up to be more intelligent, more empathetic, they're healthier, they develop healthier relationships with people. So again, we have to ask, what does it teach the kids when we do the opposite of that? The family takes their best friend and brings it to the shelter because it's peeing outside the litter box. And while we're dealing with what are ultimately, these silly stories that people give us at the adoption counter, we're dealing with more dramatic emotional issues within the family. What we have receiving these people and animals at the adoption desks or the intake desks are often relatively low-paid staff who've not really been trained in terms of how to deal with complex social issues. And they oftentimes, they're literally just checking off boxes on a form. Well, why are you getting rid of Fluffy? Well, we're moving. And they think in their head, wow, that's stupid. Moving. They check it on the box and they move on. Important follow-up questions are rarely ever even asked. And when they are asked, important information is often revealed if the people at doing that job can be trained and guided through a process for finding out what is really going on here. Why are these people getting rid of this pet? But the fact of the matter is the real reason they're getting rid of the pet is almost never the first answer. And part of it is people have an emotional response to surrendering a pet. And I will guarantee you in most every situation, there's a family dynamic that's going on. Oftentimes there are families that are actually in some sort of crisis and they don't want to tell you about it. And they think they're going to be able to just show up at your facility, drop the cat on the counter and walk away, so they say we're moving. So I would argue that while all of the work that we do is really hard and really important, another thing that we have to put on, another hat that we have to be ready to put on is social worker or counselor. Because we have the potential and actually have at our shelter found, uncovered battered women who the very first indication that that woman was being beaten was when she showed up at our shelter to surrender her pet. We are on the front lines of really important work, and we as animal welfare advocates, as animal shelters, need to be trained and prepared to find that, flesh it out, and deal with it. And on a really simple note, even when you're not dealing with the really dramatic cases like battered women, there is this kind of vicious cycle that occurs. People acquire a pet, oftentimes from a commercial source. Because of their own behavior, they create a behavior or medical problem in the animal that they don't take responsibility for. They then surrender the pet to the shelter. The shelter doesn't intervene, doesn't train or teach them anything about what they did that created that problem. The people have learned nothing. And then they go and get another pet, likely from a commercial source. And we are then enabling and perpetuating the very cycle that we say we want to stop. And so we have to stop. We have to stop doing that. And I will argue, by the way, this program is one of the reasons that opponents of no-kill will complain about no-kill. They'll say, oh, they're not totally open admission. They make you schedule an appointment, or they make it really hard. Yet they ask you all these questions. Well, yeah, we do ask questions, and it's really important that we do. A recent study was conducted by Maddie's Fund, who, by the way, is the largest animal welfare organization in the United States. with net assets of about $300 million. I mean, it's a large, conservative, very credible source. And they say if intervention takes place at the surrender counter, 60% of the people will try alternatives if you get to the root cause and you are willing to offer them alternative solutions to try. 60% of those people will actually try the alternatives. Think about the numbers of animals coming into animal shelters, that incredible impact that could have in not only keeping animals out of the shelter, but retraining people and children to be more responsible for their animals. It's an absolutely profound number to take in. And again, I mentioned this, I'm not going to dwell on it, but families who are surrendering pets are often in crisis, and sometimes they don't even know it. I'll tell you a brief story to highlight what this is like. One of my happiest moments, actually, I told you we did all this Hurricane Katrina work. We decided, we were one of, I think, the only shelter in the United States that realized when Katrina happened that the families who lost their homes and their jobs and everything were not going to be able to even start looking for their pets for several months. So when we brought the animals up to Minnesota, we required that our foster homes sign up for a 6-month commitment. So we would not put those pets up for adoption for at least 6 months. So the first wave of dogs comes up from New Orleans, and on this bus, on this transport, is this sweet, cute little beagle. And in that emergency rush, in comes a mother and her daughter. And the mother kind of pulls me aside and she says, we're having a really tough time in our family right now, and I just divorced my husband, I don't have a job, and I'm just thinking my daughter is really in a tough space. Having a companion in her life might be really great. She's just lost her friends, we moved. But I don't have money, so the 6-month thing, because you're going to provide all the food and everything, seems like a great thing. I think it would be great for us to have a dog in the home. And it was just like, sure, okay, let's go check out some dogs. We went through a number of dogs. Things were okay. I brought this beagle out, and it was like this instant love match happened between the little girl and the dog. Both of them had the exact same experience at the exact same time. They both just lit up. The dog ran over, literally just wrapped his paws around her neck and started kissing her face. They just fell madly in love. Needless to say, the beagle goes home with the family. And over the next 6 months, life was not that easy for that family. It wasn't. And so at about the 6-month mark, the mother shows up at the shelter with the dog, and the daughter isn't with them. And she's there to return the beagle, and she couldn't bring the child with because she was too distraught. And you all know what I'm about to tell you is true. All the people who knew the woman were saying, you shouldn't keep the dog, you don't have a stable job yet, you're moving around, life is tough, blah, blah, blah. You know all the whole ropes. And I just looked at the mom and I said, so tell me this, how does your daughter feel about this? And she was like, oh, she's devastated, she's destroyed. And I said, yeah, no doubt, she just lost her dad, she just lost her home, she lost her kids, and now you're taking her best friend away from her. And the woman looked at me like I just slapped her in the face. And she started crying. And then she said, oh, you're right. And she went home and brought the dog with her and decided to keep her. 2 years later, I got a card in the mail.
You're going to cry, aren't you? Go ahead.
With a large donation and a photo of the child in bed sleeping with the dog. And she said, thank you so much for having the courage to tell me what I needed to hear that day. Thank you. And we need to get better. We need to get better at and I would say that family was in crisis. And And the messages that that family was getting from the rest of society were not the messages that they needed to hear. And we in animal welfare need to be ready to step up and give them the messages that they needed to hear to make their lives better. And these people, what they need is a really heartfelt intervention. When you're doing this work, there are some really important questions that you have to answer. Ask yourself, not the people. What's going on inside the head of the people at our intake desk is, number one, is this pet safe in the current situation that it's in? We sometimes find situations where, honest to God, that pets are not safe. And in that case, you have one choice. You take the pet now, immediately, no questions asked. Then you can just say, here, fill out the form. Thank you for bringing in your pet. If there's an issue that can be corrected, even if the family feels they've already tried everything, you need to move on to the next steps. And then you have to ask yourself, has the family's bond to that pet actually been completely severed? Sometimes they think it is, but it hasn't been. And I'll give you a little trick that you can all take home to your shelters right this minute. Step one of the interview process is, oh, tell me, some of the best things about your pet. They're going to want to sell you your pet. Oh, he's really adoptable. He's really nice. Well, tell me some of your favorite things about him. Then they start doing it. Oh, tell me about when you got the pet. Start asking and triggering their memory to go back and start reconnecting to those happy moments they had with their pet.
Like marriage.
It's exactly like marriage counseling. It's just and you're going to be able to evaluate at that point. Not only are you going to be able to assess, is there a bond here still? But you're also, by triggering those memories, you're actually starting to bring the bond back into the picture. So that becomes the focus of the discussion that you're having with that family. And kind of jumping around a little bit, I just have to say, this is a typical scenario. And this is an example. I could go through case after case after case of how people create problems, they don't deal with them, and we do a really bad job of educating people about it. And a lot of it, honest to gosh, is just nutrition in our culture right now. I could do 5 hours on just how bad pet food is and all the problems it creates for our pets. But here's a classic example. Cat is fed absolutely garbage food, and I would say 99% of the cat food that we feed our cats is garbage food. Read the ingredients of that Meow Mix. There's a reason I picked that one. They are ground yellow corn, chicken byproduct meal, I don't even know what that is, corn gluten meal, whole wheat, beef tallow. A little further down the list, corn syrup. We're putting high fructose corn syrup in our cat food? Are you kidding me? And then we wonder why they end up with all these inflammatory conditions in their urinary tracts because we're feeding them inflammatory junk. That is exactly what's happening. 90% of the cat issues that we face at the shelters can simply be solved by feeding them good quality raw food. That's what these cats are designed to eat. They're not designed to eat fat junk. And the problem is that most of the issues that are caused by pet foods and things, veterinarians can't really detect. So a cat's got an inflamed bladder or kidneys or urinary tract, they can't detect that in a test, but it doesn't mean the cat's comfortable. So the people take the cat off to the vet, the vet says everything's fine, but in fact, they're dealing with an issue caused by the pet food, and the cat has been peeing around the house outside the litter box. Then someone in the family says, the cat's got to go, it's the cat or me, now the family's fighting, and that's when they show up at your shelter. And then they say, we're moving. It's because we're moving. And for me, what I do is I say, oh, where are you moving to? Oh, we bought a house over, you bought a house? Really? You're going to own the house? Well, yeah. Well, why are you bringing the cat with you? You know, and because what you'll find is that if you get good at having those conversations, if the story they're telling you doesn't quite make sense, they're not telling you the truth. And you can very politely just keep digging until you know, oh, now I've got the whole picture. And so the real follow-up questions, you know, get you to the bottom of it. And we have a pretty good routine for getting that fixed. What we need is a good help desk. We don't need a bottle of euthanasia solution. And I'll just say this, because we're running short on time, but I want to do this because it's fun. When most shelters hear litter box issues, they cringe. When I hear litter box issues, oh, crumb. This was so good too. This is what I hear. Get it back. And that's because we sell a whole bunch of products that we can use to help solve that problem. All of the things on that list. Odor eliminator, cat attract for the litter box, special cat litter, great pet food that will help solve the problem. So literally, I can solve their problem and make money doing it too. I mean, and so I will say, you know, maybe selling cat litter isn't as dramatic as animal rescue, but I will say maybe it's more important. You know, we have got to, as a culture, start to figure out what are the good products. The marketing is all BS. We've got to figure out what are the actual good products that really help the animals, and we can help hook people up with them and solve a world of problems. Again, we're running really low on time, so I'm going to go really fast now. In addition to having great online staff to deal with those issues, we have an online help desk, and it's built in a very generic way, so that if you want to integrate it into your own website and brand it as your own, you're more than welcome to do that. It allows people to search by species, by issue, and then they can call up all kinds of interactive information that will help them solve those problems. And we don't just offer this to people. Our help desk people have the same tool available to them when they're on the phone talking to people, so they can help solve those problems for people. So really important. Help desk keeps pets in the home and generates cash. Both really good things from my perspective. And honestly, if you think about it, if you can intervene, teach people about good pet nutrition or any of those other issues, then you've changed the behavior. You've kept the pet in the home, and they're not going to repeat that cycle again. It's an absolute triple win. And for the most part, our shelters are not particularly great at it. But I do think that it is the program. You know, we talk about going into schools and doing, you know, education programs. We don't teach anything from that. We would teach a lot from this, because all of those people that we interact with on a daily basis, we can change the way they are caring for and tending for their pets, thereby making their lives way better. We're not really taking a break.